Hi, and good afternoon. Welcome back again to our WHW webinar series. My name is Sharon, the Business Director of eLearning Minds. I'm your host today. All right, a few quick housekeeping matters before we kickstart. Please check to ensure your name listed in the webinar is correct so that we know who you are. Be patient if there are any technical glitches. Stay participated and you can use the chat room to interact with us. If you have any questions for our speaker, post them in the chat box. We will try our best to address all the questions at the end of the session. Lastly, and more importantly, please remember to engage, learn, and enjoy. All right, you may wonder who is video arts. For 50 years, video arts have provided award-winning video and e-learning courses and content. eLearning Mind is very proud to partner with video arts in providing entertaining learning content to engage the learner and change workplace behavior. Today, we are excited to have our partner and friend, the CEO of Video Arts, Martin Edison, be with us today. Well, we just met at Learning Technologies in London last May 2022. All right. Martin has more than 25 years of experience in the learning content and technologies businesses. He has become one of the foremost speakers and thought leaders on the subjects of the video in learning. Let's view our fun webinar intro video.
Hi, Edie, what's up? Oh, hi, Sharon. I was just thinking about this new hybrid working policy. Do you think it will work?
I really don't know. Does hybrid working work?
Hey, if you want to find out more about hybrid working in your organisation, join us at the webinar on the 20th of October. We'll talk about issues like management, performance measurement, and the benefits and challenges of hybrid working and much more. So join us on October the 20th at 3 p.m.
Are you ready? Let's welcome Martin. Hi.
Good morning,
Martin.
Sharon. Great to join you from London.
All right. Thank you very much for waking early in the morning for us.
My pleasure.
Right. And also, and also thanks for joining our innovative videos. We get a very good feedback about the videos that we did. All right. Okay,
Great.
so today we have a fascinating topics to discuss where we talk about making hybrid work, right? By preparing how to prepare your organizations in hybrid working culture, right? I know that you will have a lot to share later. Before starting the discussion, I would like to share some information with our audiences, right?
Okay.
All right, so this is some of the factor that the article is regarding the flexible working arrangement, right? One of the new sections in the Employment Act Malaysia 2022, employees in Malaysia are offered flexible work options, which will be enforced on the 1st of January 2023. Well, I believe most of you have heard about this news as well. Well, Martin, do you have the similar situation in UK or Europe?
Yes, Sharon. I think the context for all of us is very similar over the last 2.5 to 3 years, where through the rise of COVID, we've all experienced a switch to fully remote working. But then as that has hopefully begun to disappear, a new hybrid working culture has started to take hold in many organizations right across the world. Where we are at the moment is still in many ways finding our way here in Europe as well as in the US, and trying to find a solution that works not only for the organization, but for all of the people that work within it.
All right, yeah. So as well as today, I've actually prepared some poll question. So I would like to find out from our audiences today, right? Just to find out whether is your organization planning to support hybrid working, Yeah, please take 20 seconds and, join our survey, and later we will share the results, right away. Yeah, okay. In fact, in Malaysia or in this region, some organizations start practicing, but some still not quite. Yeah, it all depends on the readiness and the culture. Okay. Yep. So, and in a way that we also, that's why we bring up this topic, to see. All right, this is the result from our participant. Okay. Well, quite a numbers. Majority are already practicing right now. That's great. Or some prepare for next year. Cool. Thank you for your participation. All right. Well, actually, I also prepared some data to share with our audience today regarding some statistic. Okay. So this is the statistic done by Hirely Malaysia. While from the statistic, we can say that the majority of employee is even hit all the ways to 86.2%, claim to be happier with hybrid working arrangement, right? That's another survey by Cisco Malaysia, right? There are more than, there are 73.5% would like a hybrid working arrangement, right? And the employee believe that hybrid work has a positive effect on all areas of employee well-being. That's including emotional, financial, mental, physical, and social category. Well, I believe some of you maybe agree with me. Okay, so I would like to pose another, poll question, right, to gauge everybody ideas about, is your organization or your managers are ready to support hybrid working? Yeah, I think this is important as much as, the employee would like to go for hybrid working. Well, there's still some noises, whether the organization or even the managers are ready to support hybrid working. Yeah. Well, just let me hear from our audiences. I think this will be very interesting outcomes, right? So later we're able to see, how are they ready to go for that. Okay, all right, that's the result. Cool. Looks like the organization are quite well prepared. Some said no, maybe. I think meaning you are coming to the right place. Those who are ready, maybe later Martin can share a little bit more and we can benchmark, how are we, benchmark with, the people in UK or Europe. Those are not ready. I hope Martin can share a little bit more on tips and tricks on how can we or your experience in supporting those people that would like to go for hybrid working. All right, so let's share with us and see how we can get ready on this part.
Yes, thanks, Sharon. I think the feedback there from our audience today is pretty similar actually to surveys that we've run and that we've seen with maybe up to 80% of workers who've surveyed favouring the flexibility of hybrid working. But there being some kind of nervousness from senior management about how that works and the impact that has on the productivity of the organisation. And that's really something that I guess prompted us to look at how to develop our video-based micro-learning series that we'll talk about later. So the first place for us to start was to look at what are the main challenges that face not just people starting hybrid working, but also the challenges that present themselves to businesses that have been trying to do this for a little while. At the beginning, I think for those of you who are just starting, the first question is really how do working policy. So how do we approach this? Who makes the decisions on what it should look like, and what's right for us? That needs to take place first. And one of the big factors of that is that not everyone has the same circumstances, and hybrid has shown that all of us have different expectations when we go into work, Sharon. So for a manager or senior manager or a team builder, they obviously like the idea of having the team around them to help develop them. For somebody that's looking to build their career and fast track, again, they may be more positive about being in the office a lot of the time and actually progressing and promotions, etc. And there's also people that join organizations that we'll come back to a little later on. So if you've just joined an organization, you're going to want to find out how it works, meet lots of people. And so being in the office makes a lot of sense for you. On the flip side, there are people who, through the whole pandemic and into this new era of hybrid working, have realized that having a more flexible arrangement is a fantastic way to help them and help them be more productive. So imagine somebody with kids or with caring responsibilities, you know, that idea of having to go into an office when you're supposed to drop the kids off, wasting time on a commute when you could actually be working from home. Those are all really important factors. And then finally, there are a younger audience who might be joining an organization, but maybe they live in shared accommodation. So they don't have their own office at home. They don't have a suitable space. And so for those sort of people, again, it's having that sort of right balance to make things work for them as well. So those are all kind of challenges of thinking, how do we approach this from different people's perspectives? For a manager, it really comes down to managing performance, managing productivity, and understanding how if people aren't there in front of you, how can I manage them effectively? And we'll talk about that. It really comes down to this final point, Sharon, that if people are not in front of you the whole time, as a traditional manager, you have to get used to the idea that you need to create a level playing field. Whether somebody works with you in the office or whether they're working at home, as a manager, your role is changing a little bit to accommodate for those different patterns.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. I believe that those days we never thought that, you know, we're going to depending on things like, you know, Teams, right? You know, all these technologies to help us in terms of, you know, our working arrangement. But it's due to the pandemic, basically, it's been transformed the entire workplace. Yep. Yeah. Against that, the point that you share is totally that I agree that, you know, some of our organizations here are facing the same situations as well.
Great. Yeah, and there's a technical term that the expert that we worked with, Dr. Penny Pullen, who's the author of Virtual Leadership, a best-selling book, brought up, which is the concept of proximity bias. So you can look that up afterwards, I guess, on Google. But what it means is that if somebody is close by you and you're working close to them, when you need something or there's a project comes up, managers sometimes just think about the guy or the lady that sat next to them and forget about people that are not there. We kind of call it out of sight, out of mind. And so that's a big challenge to factor into this.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. Last week I was with one of the, you know, MNC office, right? So this guy saying that, you know, there's no point for me to go back to office where my colleagues is not in, right? As much as I want to be back to office, but none of them in the office. So, you know, which is true. And he still enjoying the days is that, you know, I can just pull 2 or 3 people in, you know, just have a quick discussion and then we can get the checklist done. Yeah, so this is the day that, you know, people start to think about, you know, whether 100% remote or hybrid. Yeah, this is the points to be think about that. Great.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, we also have the next you know, questions that we want to also discuss. All right.
Yes, let's move on. The next question, I think, Karen, you just picked on one from your meeting last week, which is that again, people want to work in a flexible and hybrid way. So the kind of statistics that you shared earlier already show that people are very keen to do it this way. And if they're not able to do it in your organization, they might possibly look to move to an organization that will give them that opportunity. So it comes down to that improved work-life balance that you touched on with your statistics. It also comes down to the idea that people like it because they can kind of balance their own work schedules. So they can figure out, as you just mentioned with your meeting, when they need to come in the office and collaborate with people, or when they need to do focused work that would be much easier to get done at home. And they can really plan and work around that pattern so it works most effectively for them. I think we've seen for all of us that having to kind of adapt has helped to build our resilience, and it's helped to make us all more adaptable. And that, I think, is a benefit in terms of the future. But there are a couple of other things that we've experienced at Video Arts here in London as well, that I'd mention. One is that you can suddenly start to look at a wider talent pool to bring into your organization. So you don't have to necessarily think of hiring people that can be in your office at 9 a.m. 5 days a week every morning, when you can actually think about how a hybrid working pattern would enable you to look at talent that may be in a different city, maybe in a different region, or maybe even in a different part of the world. So there's a massive benefit to hybrid working there. And I pick up on that last point as well. The way that it's working, the more flexibility that people have, the happier and more productive they are, that should help to retain those people in the organization. I think we all know that one of the biggest costs that organizations have is the cost of having to recruit and replace people. And in the current climate, with what was called the Great Resignation, and looking to find ways to not just attract new people, but to then retain them, having a flexible working arrangement is a big factor.
Yeah, correct. In fact, I think last month I read about the McKinsey survey, and in general, it's quite surprised is that people do not, almost 50% of people do not work at the same place, or they may actually work on a different job. Yeah, with the reasons like you mentioned, you know, due to post-COVID, right? People may not want to leave their home far away, right? They rather to stay nearest to their sibling, as well as also, you know, the job opportunity right now is more open up, like, you know, like Video Arts, you know, it's kind of like, there are organizations are giving options of hybrid working or remote working. So people tends to open up that options as well. And then thirdly is also during the, you know, the age, you know, it's kind of like some certain society as aging, right? So you are kind of like, people may think about retired earlier, you know, comparing to those days, they may continue to work because, well, after all, they may have a second thoughts, right? You know, I may want to spend more time with my family members rather than, you know, go back to the job place. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Similarly here in e-learning minds, due to this, we also start, you know, preparing to work for hybrid. I agree that talent acquisition is one of the benefits as for the organization per se. Like we currently also have a colleagues working remotely from Jakarta. All right. Yeah. So without this approach, we would never thought that, you know, to have a colleague working remotely. And we believe that, you know, that may actually help a lot to hire the locals, to support the local clients. You know, this is definitely in us that we see the benefits. Yeah. And furthermore, to have the balance, which is true that currently some of the recruitments comes in, right? The first thing the candidates may ask, so is your organization offer hybrid working, right? So meaning that if you are open for that, definitely you may have more potentials to recruit talents, you know, different group or diversity kind of a talents into your organization. Yeah. I believe that this is where I hope most of the organization, you know, seeing this is the opportunity, right, to grab the talents outside your areas.
Yes, And actually, Sharon, you make a good point that in the current research that we're doing for a new series on talent and management is really important. We now have probably up to 5 different generations who are all working. And so having the flexibility to accommodate, as you may suggest, somebody who are older workers that perhaps want more flexibility is another big benefit. Last point I'd make on this around that benefit that you also touched on is getting used to the idea that people don't work at the same pace, and particularly if you now have a colleague in Jakarta or if you have colleagues around the world, people don't work at the same time. So part of the research in the series we created was to get people to understand the concept of asynchronous working. So the idea that you don't all have to be working at the same time to get a task done, and appreciating how people work at different times and working asynchronously is again a fantastic way for the organization to be more productive.
Yeah, I think talent acquisition is going to be the next hot topic, because due to this situation, right, talent acquisition is become very crucial. In fact, there's a lot more HR actually look into talent acquisition managers to able to, getting the right candidates and having the processes on that.
Yes.
So when is this series going to be reviewed? That'll be very, interesting.
Yeah, so the talent, in fact, we are actually filming today some of the talent programs. So that will be accompany the hybrid working programs, which have already been released and are available through eLearning Minds. So we hope that at the end of 2022, that we'll be releasing a new series focused on talent attraction and talent retention. And I'll pick on another subject that's coming into that in a moment or two as we work through today's presentation.
Yeah. I think that will be great. Yeah. Okay, cool. We'll look forward to that series to be up. Sorry? Yeah, let's move on. Sure. All right.
Yeah, this was the next area that, again, we've touched on a little bit, Sharon, earlier on in our discussion, and that is the fact that organizations are continually having to hire new talent, but in a hybrid world are going to have to find different ways to support them when they're working in a new environment. So I think in particular, I talked about joiners and younger people who in the past would have needed lots and lots of face-to-face support on a daily basis. And so in particular, we've seen that become quite a challenge for organizations and for managers to work around. And when we were researching the new talent development series, what we found was that there is a big gap in what's called the onboarding process. So that's the kind of process that for many organizations, they think starts when they've hired somebody, they relax and think, wow, that's great, we've got that new person starting. And then within a few weeks or perhaps a couple of months, that person leaves. And they think, oh boy, we've got to start all over again. We need to hire we need to go out and find another recruit. This is perhaps the biggest drop-off point. And a lot of people don't realize that when you hire somebody, once they said yes to your job offer, that's when onboarding should start. Not the day they walk in the door, but actually maybe the few weeks before in terms of preparing that person to join your organization. So in a hybrid world, even when that person does join, you may not see them every day. So it is critical to start to build up those channels for communication with a new person before they start. Lots of great ideas in terms of how you can do that and introduce them to the team via social events online. get them to join meetings online ahead of time, get them obviously to start perhaps looking at your organization and beginning their induction into the organization. And once they've actually joined, it's about using that kind of technology that's now available as a manager in an organization to keep people regularly in contact with others, because that can be the biggest area where those difficulties happen. It's also worth saying that for anyone new, and I think all of us when we've joined organizations know that a lot of learning is done, I say unconsciously, or it's done on the job. Well, we're all in learning very familiar with this 70-20-10 theory. And 70% of what people learn is kind of as a consequence of listening to somebody who's doing it themselves, or just asking questions and learning in the flow of work. And what we have to be able to do is to replicate that in a hybrid world by creating those opportunities, not just to collaborate in the office with people and make most of the office time, but to utilize a buddy system for new people so that they have a reference point to talk to, and to keep moving.
Yeah. Just one, when you talk about this, right? I just recall one of the HR or L&D that I'm talking to them. It's really the situations happening like some of the organizations here, they would like to do a combo or combined induction program. So meaning they will do potentially quarterly, right? So because they may not have sufficient people or resources to conduct this. So what they did is that they will combine, right, a group of people when they are maybe, quarterly, they will do the induction or onboarding. And the challenges is that the person may leave before the onboarding happens. Yeah. So that's why onboarding, I agree with you that it cannot be just on the day. Sometimes we need to do pre-onboarding exercise, right? Whether digitally or physically, to get prepared, these persons come on board, right? Number one. And number two, one of the situation that I received also, the managers do not know how to take care of the new employee. This is also another challenge that, some managers, they just been promoted, yeah, and they may not know too much about, how can I, onboard the new staff to be part of them. So this is another challenges that I saw, not just from the employee itself, but it's also from the managers that, how they actually onboard their own subordinate.
Yeah, I think, Sharon, that the traditional manager, when he has somebody new or people in their team, the way to manage performance would be very often that person is there in front of you and you can do that regularly. But when staff are working remotely, performance is harder to observe, basically. So instead of assessing performance or the time that people spend in the office, which is probably what a lot of people used to do, or even just assessing whether people turn up for a virtual meeting, managers now have to consider looking at the outcomes that people actually produce, the contribution and value that they produce in terms of projects, rather than the kind of whether they're present in the office.
Yeah, I think that would be a good tips, for us to able to pick up from here. Yeah, maybe we can move to the next topic.
Yeah. Just before I do that, the last thing, which again, feedback has shown that really helps for onboarding, is to start for a manager to start the sort of discussions around performance and career development early. So don't recruit somebody new and then think, oh, I'll do their half-year review in 6 months' time, and then find out a little bit more about what their ambitions are. The key to retention is career development, and so the earlier you can start those conversations as a manager, and understand what somebody, in terms of their capabilities and ambitions are, the more that can aid retaining them in the organization.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I think that will be linked to what we're going to talk about about
Yeah.
what is the quiet quitting and how do
Yeah.
we manage it.
Yeah, this one's been a sort of a phrase that's just sort of risen in the last few months, isn't it,
Yes.
Sharon? That it's funny here
Yeah.
in the UK and in Europe. I think it may have come from the US, but it's this idea that people are not actually leaving an organization, but
Yeah.
they're dissatisfied, and so they are basically just doing the minimum requirement, which for a manager is maybe harder to understand, but they're just putting no more time or effort than is absolutely required into the role. So that, I think, is something that, again, in terms of how you deal with it and how you manage it is about engagement. And it's about having that sort of idea of talent management at the heart of what your organization or your management team are doing. So basically, talent management is about having the right people with the right skills at the right time in the right place. And it's something that's constantly evolving. So it isn't something where you recruit and that solves the problem. It's an ongoing process. So managers have got to invest time into it, in understanding that will be the best way to retain their staff as well. I talked about managers taking a hold and talking about development as a key to this. But the other thing is to encourage your team themselves to develop and to talk and empower them to talk about how they want to develop their skills as well. And it isn't necessarily a case of saying, oh, well, if they join and immediately I'm talking about having to develop them, that's not going to help with their focus. People want to progress in different ways, Sharon. Some people, yes, will want to join and be promoted and become a manager. Other people's ambitions may be to develop their career in different ways. They may have other interests where they want to get a qualification, or they may be interested in another department longer term in your organization. And so there may be a chance for you to develop a kind of succession plan and see how that would work. So all of those areas, I think, in terms of development conversations are an important way to avoid the kind of losing contact or losing touch with somebody, and then when it's too late, when they're resigning, then understand, maybe I could have seen this opportunity for them to move sideways or move up in our organization.
Yeah, which is true that, certain articles or some findings actually why people quite quitting, because sometimes they didn't see, where am I going, right? When I'm with this organization, I don't see my career pathing. I don't see where am I going from here. So it's not clear to them. That's why money may not be, salary or package may not be the only things, right? Now, due to this, many people are looking for career advancement, right? They want to find themselves more meaningful. I wake up in the morning, I don't want to, drag myself, to office, or even drag myself to switch on my computers to work from home, right? They rather want to find something more meaningful and something that they foreseen that after I'm doing this, I can see my progress. What is next for me? Yeah.
And the big plus of accommodating these conversations with people who already work with you is that that very often they're a good fit for the culture of your organization. And that they work well alongside their colleagues. So all of those unknowns that when you do a new recruitment, you have to probably worry more about. If you can find a way to to develop your internal talent pool, then the more beneficial that will be to you as well.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one interesting use cases that we had with one of the client, right? Because they thought that learning culture wasn't being so great in their organization. So when we start to deploy, those the content, like video arts content across, to the different division, different location, and through this deployment, they managed to identify, some of the good talents within the organization. They may be remotely, in some of their locations that nobody know about them. But through this activity, basically, they can find out about, the learning cultures for one smaller group or one particular persons that, you may able to draw the attentions of the management that, hey, who is this guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the message that I like about one of the sessions by this CHRO mentions that taking learning is your journey. It's not the responsible from the company just pushing it, right? But it rather that it's the opportunity for them. We make available for them. Learning is their responsibility, and learning will go with you, right? You may not be with the companies for long, all right? You may or may not, but whatever you learn, you experience, it will be with you forever. Yeah, this is your asset. This is your value. So this is one of the statements that I heard from, one of the project launchings that the CHRO mentioned. And I believe that this is something that take back, to those employee that who have the opportunities to learn anywhere, anytime. Yeah.
Mm. That's a great point, Sharon. That's a great point you make, and it ties in. I kind of finish on this too, saying that learning culture is obviously an area that again has become something more and more that managers are beginning to recognize. And we have a nice animation micro course that's part of the eLearning Minds library that we developed. But that topic about getting individuals to take responsibility is wrapped up in a concept called growth mindset. Again, there's a nice little animation that helps to introduce that to people. But yeah, this idea that it isn't always just about thinking, well, the organization needs to do this for me. People, if they can take responsibility for their own growth and understand that throughout their career and throughout their lives, there'll be learning opportunities. That's a really powerful.
All right. Okay. So. All right. Yeah. So I think just now your line a little bit dropped. Yeah. Cool. Yep. We got you. So this will be another, we want to hear the practical tips that you can take away to support, the organizations for hybrid works.
Yeah. So here's the practical stuff that everyone tuned in for that maybe are already doing it, but are recognizing some challenges as well. So these are some of the practical tips. The first was that central point I talked about earlier, which is the idea of managers recognizing that out of sight sometimes means out of mind. So it's easy to forget about remote or hybrid workers as you can't see them. So think about proximity bias and make sure that you are creating a level playing field. The next point I talked about is that idea of embracing asynchronous working. So not all work has to be done together and at the same time. So use your time appropriately and understand how your colleagues use their time as well. So that's a really important element of that concept too. Managing performance. I talked about a moment or two ago in terms of this idea that instead of addressing your performance via the usual idea of time people spent in the office or time people spend in meetings with you, start to consider the kind of outcomes, the contribution they make, and the value that they're adding to projects as a way to manage performance. Miscommunication and rumors, those are the two big issues that lots of people have flagged, where if everyone's not together, there is more chance that things can go wrong, Sharon.
Yeah.
So if there is a void, if people don't know, haven't heard what's happening, it's very often that people will fill that void with their own theory, with their own gossip, with their own rumors. So as a manager, it's really important to avoid that by keeping people informed and checking in with people if they're working outside of the office regularly. And that picks up on the point below, which is about trust. I think that is probably, again, one of the single biggest factors in many organizations, is that trust is something that a manager can take a lot of time to build up and can easily be something that is broken. So to keep that level of trust at its peak, managers need to consistently be working on communication. Managing tension or managing conflict, again, in an office, you know that's happening because you might see two people having an argument in the kitchen. And we have a nice example of that in the films. But actually, in a hybrid world, sometimes it's a bit harder because somebody might be working from at home. You don't know there's been a disagreement. So again, in terms of managing tension, it's understanding that conflict is good at times in teams, but knowing what people's different perspectives are and why decisions have been made are really important to avoid that turning into a major problem. So deal with it positively. And I think there's the phrase of kind of lean into problems. Don't be a manager who tries to kind of wish it wasn't happening and hide under the table, which our character in the films does. Lean into it, understand what people's frustrations are, and get involved. And then the last 2 points are more or less not just for managers, but for everyone. We all now do a lot more hybrid and online meetings than we ever used to. So again, we need to understand how it's all of our responsibility to level the playing field. If we're in an office, but our colleague is on maybe a not so good connection at home on the internet, how can we help that person? So maybe help them to speak first so we understand what their perspective is, help them with the materials that are being handed out in the room and send them via email or WhatsApp, and maybe even have a designated person who's in the office as their buddy who makes sure that whatever they're listening can be heard, and if they want to make a point, that they're not forgotten in the meeting. And more generally, I think in terms of being a hybrid team player, this is something that we can all learn from. Again, it's really that idea of, for all of us to embrace that there are different personas in the workplace. So we may have colleagues who are carers or who don't have a great workspace at home, or who have different circumstances. So embrace that. Embrace the idea of asynchronous working, that we don't all have to work together at exactly the same time to get the job done. And just basically make sure that you're approachable, that you're contactable, so that people don't kind of lose contact with you if you're not working in the office. And be reliable. If you say you're going to do something by a point to hand over for somebody in a project, then make sure you get that done. So yeah, those are all the kind of practical lessons. There are lots and lots of them. There's probably more than 30 or 40 in the whole series, which we've contained in the supporting materials and infographics and all of that, whether you're just starting or whether you've been doing this for a while and maybe have a few headaches, it's all really good practical advice to apply.
Yeah, basically, I also gone through the content itself. I found that it's very practical, and those are the tips and tricks. And sometimes it can really reflect into our own, whether you're the managers, whether you're the managements, or whether you're the team player. I think everybody must play their role, to make the success, to create the success story. It's not just the organization issue, managers issue, or just the employee, but it really need to be, come in as a holistic approach to ensure the hybrid work in your organization, right?
Very
Okay,
true.
cool. Right. Okay. So yeah, I think we cover quite a bit of this. For those who stay online, you may want to post the question later. We will answer some of the question. Before we go to the Q&A session, maybe we can go through the video. Yeah. So we have prepared the videos, to be shared. So basically, Video Arts have created the latest collections to support the employee or the manager to adapt to hybrid working. And let's look at the trailer.
Morning, Dev.
Hi, Linda. Thanks for joining.
Hello.
Just had a call from Dev.
Who?
You have to become a better facilitator.
If you want them to work, you've got to get them to show up and grind it out.
Sounds like a massive mistake.
So disrespectful. This is so disrespectful.
No need to thank me, man. You gotta look after your own, yeah?
Oh, come down on them so hard they won't know what hit them.
Did he mean tomorrow today or tomorrow?
It's not great communication.
You've wasted his time, mate.
There must be more to it.
We need to be really careful how and when we communicate.
It's time for a snippy email.
Are we really doing this?
Accidental favouritism affects people's promotions, earnings. We have to consider the whole hybrid talent pool.
I suppose I just don't trust people working from home all the time. Just tell me how to make it up to you.
You think we can pull it back?
Look at it as an investment.
We're not in the office to work together in person, but it shouldn't make much difference.
Any problems, we'll review and adjust.
This all sounds really promising.
Great to see you all in such a cooperative mood.
Well done.
Right. I think this is so interesting. Yeah. So I believe that through this trailer, maybe some of you may able to reflect, what's happening in your organization, your colleagues. Yeah. So you can, go to find out more from Video Arts website. There are a lot more series that you can have a look at it. Okay. The next sessions that I would like to share with you how actually we actually offer the contents to our client, right? So in eLearning Mind, we always want to help our clients make their digital learning work. So we believe that good content is one of the critical components to success, such as Video Arts. The platform is another component to ensure learners will have better learning experiences and learning activities will be captured to measure the learning outcomes. Last but not least, the learning strategies. This is crucial to making digital learning work strategically with your business objectives. We always drive the strategy with your core competency that embraces your organization's values and cultures. In eLearning Minds, we name it the Golden Triangle. We strongly believe digital learning is a journey, and we have shared this journey with many of our clients. Well, Martins, what's your thoughts about this? Martin, you're muted. Yeah.
Oh,
all right.
That's better. Yeah, your idea rings very true with our conversations with customers, which are that blend of video-based resources or creating learning pathways are really critical in terms of the success of a learning project. It's very true that a lot of organizations don't get full use of their learning platform. in terms of their countries, they really need to think of how they optimize that with an approach similar.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we are glad that what we are practicing here is quite aligned with what is the same that practicing. In fact, we also learned from video arts over the years, in adopting this methodology, and we found that this is really works for our client as well. Well, I think it's time for us to go for Q&A. Their question has been posed to us. All right. Let's take the first question. All right. Okay, how can leaders ensure they are being inclusive in the hybrid workplace? Wow. We talk about employee and managers, but how about leaders?
Yeah, I think for leaders, it is important as well to understand that concept of the level playing field, because even for their teams, they need to understand that sort of idea of proximity bias that takes place, and of appreciating that on a higher level in terms of inclusivity. I think you talked, Sharon, about the generations in the workplace, which is an element where strategically for leaders, they need to think of widening the talent pool. Kind of looking at the policy that they have for inclusive recruitment. There's no doubt that a more happier workforce is more productive as well. So by being able to offer that flexibility, there will be a benefit for leadership to see as well.
Yeah. In fact, leaders, I think they should take more open-minded kind of, the change into move, to listen. Be more opening to listen to the feedback, from across a different layer, different areas of throughout the whole organization. I believe that if any leaders do so, definitely you're able to find the right formula in terms of, implementing hybrid in your workplace. Great, right? Let's take the next question. Okay, who should take the lead or accountable for hybrid working? Is it HR, senior leaders, or individual managers?
Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it? I
Nothing
think
to do with me, right? Everybody will say this is the...
Yeah, I think everyone will try probably and avoid it, but there is a lot of collaboration involved, because remember those kind of 5 personas that I talked about? That was something that was developed here in the UK by Ernst & Young when they were thinking about how to bring their workforce into hybrid working. And so that was more of a consultation between HR, management, and individuals. And I think that's probably the key to hearing all those voices that would help.
Yeah. I think it's not just a top-down approach, but it has to be, it's a holistic that everybody need to go in the same directions, So I think policies or some of the transformation need to be clearly defined so that everybody will be aligned along the way. Great. So that takes the next question. Okay, how can people and teams manage engagement when working in a hybrid way?
Yes. Yeah, that probably comes back to the idea or this concept of being a good hybrid team player. So the engagement thing is important, because you may during your day have times when you're doing focused work and you don't want to be in contact with people, but they may not know that. So you've got to be very clear with the online tools you're using of when, for example, with Teams, you're available or unavailable, and of being reliable when you are part of a project, that you deliver your elements on time. Because remember, again, that idea of asynchronous working, you may have a colleague who's not going to start work until 2 hours after you've finished. So you really need to think in terms of that kind of engagement across the group, that communication is critical.
Yeah, in fact, like us, in e-learning minds, we also depending on tools like Microsoft Teams, ClipUp, and then there are others like Slack. There are many tools able to help, the collaboration be more effective as well. Yeah, that could be one of the areas that you may want to take a look at that. Okay, so we have our last question today. How can we ensure that people fulfill the number of hours for work week to weed out the naughty ones?
Yeah, we haven't talked about this very much, but there is a phenomena where managers in some organizations have used software to kind of track whether people are on their computer or whether they're using the keyboard or whether people are being productive, Sharon, which in most organizations I would suggest probably leads to mistrust and probably less productivity. It's the equivalent of in the office somebody coming in and putting their coat on the back of their chair and then leaving, so it looks like they're still there. I think the key is back to what I talked of earlier of trust, of building trust within the manager and the employee relationship, and of actually if there is conflict or friction or a problem, of leaning into that and understanding that to create the solution.
Yeah, in fact, one of the partners that we know, they've been practicing this is right, remote working 100%. Carrot and stick is still important, like the trust is important. At the same time, the policies as well as, to define what is the right, what is the wrong. And, the carrot and stick is still, people give us enjoy, the flexibility, but at the same time, you may want to also give certain warnings to those people, the naughty one, right? If they don't follow the rules, they didn't do this, you can give them warning, right? So I think this is something that, when the message sent out correctly and people, if they want to enjoy what they're doing right now, definitely they don't want to, take the risk, right? To not able to be employed. Yeah, this is the really one of the use cases. I know this organization, that's how they practice. And people, because the employee want to enjoy this, that's why they will not want to take their risks to become naughty.
Yeah. And if you're measuring outcomes rather than measuring time,
the hours, the
then
clock in,
that
the clock
will
out.
really be important.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I agree with you on this. All right. So that's come to our last question today, right? So time's passed very fast. We left with about, we almost come to the end. Well, I hope you can start the conversations with your management about hybrid working, right? So our webinar session close to the end. If you still have more query, please reach out to us and we will love to share our experience with you. I believe Martin's as well. So Martin, do you have any things that you want to share with our audiences before we end for today?
No, Sharon, just to thank you for your time and thank everyone for joining us this morning. And as I say, to remember those key tips and points in terms of how to develop and build your hybrid working strategy.
All right. Thank you, Martin, for your excellent sharing today. So I'll catch up with you. There are more topics that we can talk in the future. All right. So thank you very much and have a nice morning.
Thank you. Thanks again and goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye. All right. I know we are thumbs up, so give me another 5 more minutes that I would like to do the wrap up. All right. So you will be getting the email from us to share your feedback. For those who like to watch these sessions again, we will share the recording link via the email, right? And also let us know if there are any topics you hope to join in the future. We were trying to invite more guests, that we know to discuss more about the topic. Okay, so we have our next upcoming webinar is the Insider Series webinar that hosted by Intel Malaysia. And e-learning minds are invited to share about nurturing minds in a virtual world. And our CEO, Kelvin, will share with you the highlights of this webinar. Over to you, Kelvin.
In this post-pandemic era, hybrid learning is becoming the new norm in training. The experience that we learned before and during pandemic give a better idea on how to transform the training delivery that meet the requirements on having the physical and virtual learner in a training session. Join us to find out how to set up a hybrid classroom that support trainers and learners to achieve a better learning outcome and experience.
Well, thank you, Kelvin. So please click the link in the chat box or sign up this webinar via our website or our social media. Hope that you had a great session with us, and we will see you in our next webinar. Thank you very much. Bye.